The funeral hall was filled with quiet sobs, like a gentle spring rain. Clutching the lapels of her black coat, Sarah stood silently before the portrait. In the photo, her husband, Professor Jimmy Wooders, stared at the camera with his usual cold, sharp gaze. He had been a renowned archaeologist, dedicating decades of his life to excavating historical sites both at home and abroad, and was deeply respected for mentoring countless students. Mourners lined up to pay their respects, officials from the Cultural Heritage Administration, esteemed scholars from overseas, and other distinguished guests. Sarah quietly received their condolences, her gaze fixed on a spot in the room where, even in the chill of the air, it felt as though traces of her husband's presence might still linger. It was then that a man in a black suit stepped into the funeral hall. He entered with his head slightly bowed, and something about his posture struck a familiar chord in Sarah's memory. She inhaled sharply. Her son, the child she had never once forgotten, Tommy. Or rather, a man who looked exactly like Tommy. 15 years ago, when Tommy was still in middle school, he had gone missing after a car accident. At the time, he had dreamed of following in his father's footsteps to become an archaeologist, even participating in a youth archaeology exchange program held in Europe. It was during that program near Rome that the accident happened, and Tommy vanished without a trace. The police eventually gave up, declaring him presumed dead. Since that day, a hollow ache had lived in Sarah's heart. And now, standing before her was a man with Tommy's face. His jawline was sharper, his frame taller, but there it was, those two distinct bone protrusions on the inside of his left wrist. The unmistakable mark. "Forgive me, I should have come sooner," he said, his voice calm and low. Sarah's throat went dry. Carefully, she spoke, barely above a whisper. "May I ask your name?" The man politely handed her a business card. "Ian Johnson, Chief Architectural Officer, Eterna Partners Group." Her hand trembled as she accepted the card. Eterna Partners Group, the very same name written on the envelope sitting on her husband's desk the day before he died. When she looked up again, the man gave a slight, respectful bow. "I never had the honor of meeting Professor Wooders in person, but we spoke on the phone several times about the museum project." "Museum?" Sarah echoed. "Yes, I'm in charge of the architectural design for the new artifact exhibition hall. The project is based on Professor Wooders' research." She couldn't hear the rest. Her heart was pounding so hard it drowned out everything else. Tommy, no, this man who looked exactly like Tommy, had worked with her husband. And now, here he was, offering his condolences at the funeral. Yet he didn't recognize her, didn't recognize his own mother. Sarah stared at his face, the face she had missed so desperately for all these years. Her lips parted slightly, but no sound came out. For days after the funeral, Sarah couldn't bring herself to let go of that business card. Over and over, she traced the name Ian Johnson with her fingertips, feeling a strange, unsettling disconnect. Somehow, Tommy didn't seem to suit him at all. In the end, she made up her mind and called Professor Dr. Smith, one of her husband's former students. "Professor, do you happen to know an architect named Ian Johnson?" "Ian? Of course. He's a legend in the field, specializes in museums and art galleries. Studied in Europe. Everyone talks about him. Why do you ask?" Sarah couldn't bring herself to answer and quietly ended the call. A few days later, she visited the construction site of the New City Museum, the very project he was said to be leading. It was a drizzling afternoon. From the edge of the site, she spotted him, focused intently on a blueprint, his expression serious. She stood at a distance, watching, then slowly approached him. "Excuse me." He glanced at her, nodded politely, but didn't seem to recognize her. Perhaps his demeanor today was different from the funeral. "I was wondering if you could take a look at this photo." She held out an old family picture taken 15 years ago, back when Tommy was in middle school, smiling alongside the four of them as a family. For the briefest moment, his eyes flickered, just slightly. But then, he handed the photo back and said calmly, "Are you looking for someone? I'm sorry, but I don't know these people." Sarah's breath caught in her throat. Have you ever heard of the name Tommy Wooders? His eyebrows knitted slightly. Can't say I have. Doesn't sound familiar. You? I think you're my son. For a second, his eyes turned cold. I'm sorry, but what exactly are you saying? His voice was firm, his tone edged with sharpness. Sarah stood there, stunned, yet behind his composed exterior, she caught a glimpse of something else, something unsettled. Shock, perhaps. Sarah did not know what to say. He walked away. Sarah was confused. The name on the business card, the distinct bone protrusions on his left wrist since birth. And that face. Tommy's eyes, Tommy's nose, Tommy's mouth. A mother knows her own child. She wasn't going to give up. There had to be another clue. Somewhere. A few days later, Sarah was at the university hospital where she worked as a nurse, organizing patient records as usual. That's when a familiar name caught her eye. Emma Johnson, age 5, awaiting liver transplant. Guardian, Ian Johnson. Her heart sank, a heavy thud deep inside her chest. Her pulse quickened. Without hesitation, she headed toward the ward. Through the narrow gap of the hospital room door, she saw him, sitting quietly with a little girl on his lap, reading to her in a soft, gentle voice. The scene was almost too tender to bear. Sarah took a shaky breath and carefully approached the attending physician. That child. Does she really need a liver transplant? Yes, the doctor replied with a grave expression. It's acute liver failure. We need a donor as soon as possible. Sarah closed her eyes. She didn't need more evidence. She knew, the girl's features so much like Tommy's when he was a child. That little girl was her granddaughter. For several days, Sarah agonized over what to do. Finally, she gathered her courage and knocked on the hospital room door. Tommy opened it. Do you remember me? Thank you for coming to my husband's funeral. And I'm sorry for coming to your work like that, claiming you were my son. That was thoughtless of me. His face was filled with discomfort, awkwardness flashing in his eyes. Ah yes, I remember. You showed me that family photo. Said I was your son. I'm sorry for the way I reacted. I wasn't thinking clearly at the time. It's okay. I shouldn't have said something so strange so suddenly. I apologize. There was a brief, uneasy silence before he asked, So why are you here? Sarah looked into his eyes, steady and sincere. I want to donate part of my liver. If I can, I want to help the child. His expression froze. With everything she had, she spoke carefully, honestly. It doesn't matter to me whether you're my son or not. I'm not here for that. I just want to help save her life. Please, let me be tested. He stared at her, unreadable. A long silence stretched between them. Then finally he nodded. All right, thank you for your kindness to my daughter. But suspicion still clouded his eyes. He studied Sarah's face sharply, as if trying to see through her. What was it he feared so much? Sarah met his gaze, steady and determined. Doubt me if you want. I'm his mother, and I will protect my granddaughter. The walls of the examination room said nothing, but Sarah's body trembled as she thought of how a drop of blood, a single cell, could reveal everything. After giving her blood sample, she closed her eyes and whispered a prayer. Let it be true. But even if it's not, just save the child. That's all I ask. A few days later, the results of the compatibility test arrived. The attending physician spoke to Ian first. Compatibility, 97%. It's a near-perfect match. You don't often see this level of match, even between close relatives. Ian said nothing. He carefully unfolded the paper, closing his eyes for a moment. His heart pounded. Those numbers on that cold sheet of paper. Each one felt like a key unlocking a door long forgotten. That night, in his hotel room, Ian pulled out a DNA testing kit. This is just to be sure. There's no way. But his hands trembled. Instinctively, he found himself pulling out an old photo album. Pictures with his adoptive parents. Warm, peaceful images. But in every one of them, he stood slightly apart, always at the edge, like someone visiting a family he wasn't quite part of. He had no memories of his childhood. But forgotten wasn't the same as never having existed. A few days later, he approached the attending physician. Is genetic testing possible as well? It is, but both the guardian and the subject would need to give consent. I'll arrange everything. Please don't tell anyone. In secret, Ian gathered the necessary materials: strands of Sarah's hair and a toothbrush. Quietly, he submitted them for testing. While he waited, his expression changed. There was a sharpness to him now, mixed with something deeper: confusion, turmoil. Then, one day, a call came from the hospital. Sarah's blood pressure was unstable. They needed to run more detailed tests before surgery. Ian opened the door to her hospital room carefully. She was lying down, pale and dry-lipped. "Are you all right?" She smiled faintly, weak but unwavering. "I'm fine. I can't afford to take it easy. Not if it's for the child." For a brief moment, Ian caught something in her face. A flicker of familiarity. A smile he'd seen somewhere before. Gentle, strong, certain. "I don't mean to be rude," he said carefully, voice low. "But if somehow what you said is true and I really am your son, I wouldn't know what to do. I don't remember anything. Nothing." Even with her blurred vision, Sarah met his eyes steadily. "It takes time to accept. I ask myself that same question every morning. Am I really right to believe this? But saving that little girl, that's enough. That alone makes me thankful." Days later, Sarah's condition stabilized, and a date was set for surgery. Finally, part of her liver was transplanted into her granddaughter. Despite the tension, the surgery was a success. That evening, Ian received an email from the lab. DNA test results. Match. 99.999%. Biological relationship, mother-son. Felt like he could hear the paper fall from his hands. Everything, the words, the world itself, froze around him. And in that stillness, he saw her tears. Her steady, unwavering smile. The one that never gave up on him, not even for a second. She really was my mother. Ian walked down the empty hospital corridor. There was no longer any point in denying it. He was back. After all these years, all that wandering, he had finally returned. Returned to his real name. Ian Johnson sat in a small cafe near the hospital, his face expressionless as he made a call. The phone rang twice before a familiar voice answered. "Ian? Is it morning already over there?" It was his adoptive mother, Mrs. Catherine. Her voice was as calm and composed as ever. "Mom, is this a good time to talk? What's wrong? Your voice. You sound like you're shaking." He took a deep breath. 15 years ago, you said I was found after an accident and brought to the hospital, right?" "Yes. Someone called the police after finding you collapsed on the highway. You were unconscious for weeks, and you had lost your memory. Did they try to find my family back then? A police investigation or anything?" "They did. Your fingerprints were registered, and they checked the missing persons database, but there was nothing. You didn't have any ID on you, and you couldn't even speak back then. We just wanted to protect you." "Mom, I took a DNA test. I found my birth mother." Silence hung for a moment. That's wonderful news. I'm so happy for you," she said, her voice trembling with tears of joy. "Thank you, Mom. Thank you for raising me. I'll visit you soon." Ian stood there for a long time, not even bothering to wipe the tears rolling down his cheeks. On a quiet spring day, under a soft drizzle, Sarah and Ian visited the mountain village where Wooders Jimmy, Ian's father, used to come often. At the end of the winding mountain road, a small, old tile-roofed house sat quietly, breathing like a sleeping memory. It was the home of Jimmy's lifelong mentor. Though the teacher had long passed away, the courtyard was still neatly filled with archaeology books and collecting tools. An elderly man who now looked after the house greeted them warmly. "The last time Dr. Wooders came here was last spring. He came alone, quietly, buried something out back." Sarah's eyes narrowed slightly. "Buried? Something?" The old man chuckled softly and pointed to the backyard. Under the plum tree just beneath that jar. He would sit there for hours, just staring at that spot. Ian carefully began to dig into the earth. Past the damp layers of soil, a small wooden box emerged. Inside were a faded envelope, a worn leather notebook, and a handwritten letter. With trembling hands, Ian unfolded the letter. "Tommy, if you are reading this letter, it means you have found your way back. I always believed you were alive somewhere out there. It was never that you were lost, only that we could not find you. My name is Jimmy Wooders. I was and still am your father. Wherever you are, whoever you have become, you will always be my son. Your father, Jimmy." Sarah quietly wiped her tears as Tommy, no longer just Ian Johnson, opened the old leather notebook. Inside were detailed records of his life from birth until just before middle school. Page after page of old photographs brought back a name that had long been buried. Clutching the notebook to his chest, Tommy spoke softly. "I'm finally back, Mother." For the first time, Sarah called his name with all the love she had held inside for years. "Tommy, my son." In that moment, he was no longer Ian Johnson. It didn't matter if his memories returned or not. He was ready to live his life as Tommy. A few days later, in Sarah's living room, a little girl was drawing colorful pictures with crayons. "Grandma, is my daddy's name really Tommy?" Sarah smiled gently. "Yes, Emma. He's been Tommy for a very, very long time." She looked up at the distant sky and smiled. All the pain, the grief, and the endless years of searching had led to this moment of happiness. "My love," she thought, "we finally found our son. I know you must be smiling too." The sunset spread across the sky, glowing beautifully as if blessing the reunion of a long-lost family.